He's been standing on this curb for 4 minutes. Not because he's lost, because he cannot make his legs move. In front of him, 200 motorbikes, no stoplight, no crosswalk that anyone respects. And then, right next to him, an elderly woman in a conical hat steps off the curb. She doesn't run. She doesn't look both ways like she was taught in kindergarten. She just walks, slow and steady, straight into the chaos. The bikes part around her like water around a stone. She doesn't even look up from her phone. That's the exact moment most Americans realize something. Everything they thought they knew about Vietnam was already outdated. Not wrong, just old. Because the Vietnam of 2026 is not the Vietnam their parents talked about. It's not the Vietnam from the war documentaries. It's not even the Vietnam from a travel blog written 3 years ago. It's a country that is changing faster than the information about it can keep up. So today, we're going through the 12 things that catch Americans off guard the most right now in 2026. Some of them will make you laugh. One of them could genuinely save your trip. And the last one might be the biggest shock of all. Let's start with the one that terrifies almost everyone before they've even landed. Number 1. Crossing the street. Every single first-time visitor gets the same advice online. Don't stop. Don't run. Just walk at a steady pace and let the bikes go around you. It sounds insane. It sounds like a dare. And for the first crossing, it feels exactly like that. Your brain is screaming at you to freeze. Every instinct built by growing up around stop signs and crosswalks is telling you this is a mistake. But here's the part that really messes with an American's head. This isn't chaos. Not really. It's a system. Just not one written down anywhere. Road accidents are a real danger here. Vietnam does record thousands of traffic deaths a year, and it's one of the leading causes of death in the country. So this isn't a cute quirk, it's a real risk, especially for tourists who rent a motorbike without ever having ridden one. But for pedestrians who understand the rhythm, it becomes almost graceful. The honking that sounds aggressive to a Western ear? It's not anger. It's communication. A quick tap means, I see you, I'm passing on your left. Locals read these signals the way you read traffic lights. Tourists don't have that translation yet, and that's why the first street crossing becomes the story every single visitor tells when they get home. Number 2. A communist country that somehow feels safer than home. Here's a sentence that stops most Americans cold. Vietnam is, officially, a one-party communist state. No opposition party. No free press the way Americans understand it. And yet, journalists who spend real time in Hanoi keep writing some version of the exact same confused, surprised sentence. It feels more orderly and sometimes safer than parts of home. Elderly women walk alone at night without fear. Young kids wander a few steps ahead of their parents on busy sidewalks. People leave their phones sitting on cafe tables while they step away to order. Try that in most major American downtowns. So how does a government with zero tolerance for political dissent produce streets that feel this relaxed? The honest answer locals give is simple. The government governs tightly, but it intrudes lightly into daily life. Don't publicly criticize the Communist Party, don't organize protests, and you will mostly be left completely alone to live your life, start a business, and raise your family. It's not the paranoid, gray, Cold War image a lot of Americans still carry around in their heads. It's something stranger. A tight political leash paired with a loose, lived-in daily freedom. And that contradiction is exactly what makes so many Americans quietly start Googling how to move to Vietnam after their first trip. Number 3. The internet isn't what they expect. Before landing, a lot of Americans do one thing. They download a VPN. Because they assume Vietnam is like China, it isn't. Google works. YouTube works. Instagram, WhatsApp, Gmail, all working. No workaround needed. There's no great firewall here. Facebook is the one exception worth knowing about. It has been throttled or slowed at certain politically sensitive moments over the years. Not permanently blocked, but noticeably sluggish during those windows. So the real advice isn't you need a VPN to survive. It's keep one installed just in case, and only really use it if you want to stream your home country's Netflix library or if Facebook happens to be crawling that week. Oh, small detail, but it's one of the fastest ways to spot someone who did zero research before their flight. Number 4. Nobody holds the war against you. This one carries real emotional weight for a lot of Americans, and it deserves to be treated that way. Plenty of travelers admit they felt genuinely nervous the first time someone asked where they were from. They braced for coldness, maybe even hostility. What they got instead, again and again, was curiosity. Warm handshakes. Questions about which American state you're from, not which decade your country was at war with theirs. One student described it as the most welcoming reception of her entire life, in a market town where locals had probably never met a 6'5", red-headed American before. The history is real, and it's not being erased or ignored here. But most Vietnamese people you'll meet, especially the younger generation, are living forward, not backward. They're more interested in your hometown than your country's past. And that shift catches almost every American completely off guard. Number 5. Sidewalks aren't for walking. Quick lighter one before we get back into the heavier stuff. In most American cities, a sidewalk has one job. You walk on it. In Vietnam, a sidewalk has about 6 jobs, and walking is somewhere near the bottom of the list. It's a motorbike parking lot. It's a kitchen, complete with a woman crouched over a portable stove making breakfast. It's a barber shop, a nail salon, a coffee shop with plastic stools the size of a shoebox. So where do pedestrians actually walk? Usually in the street itself, right along the edge, sharing space with the same motorbikes from part 1. It sounds backwards. It looks backwards on camera. But once you're a few days in, it stops feeling strange and starts feeling like the only version of a city that makes sense. Number 6. The visa advice everyone's following is already outdated. This is the part of the video you actually want to write down. A huge number of Americans still plan their trip around advice that was true 5 years ago and simply isn't anymore. Here's what's actually true in 2026. The e-visa is now open to every single nationality on Earth, valid for up to 90 days, and it can be used at 83 different entry points across the country. That's a massive upgrade from the old 30-day limited entry system most blogs still describe. But here's the part nobody warns you about. If you're flying into Ho Chi Minh City's Tan Son Nhut Airport, there is now a mandatory digital arrival card, and it has to be submitted online within 72 hours before you land. It's free, but if you skip it, you can run into real problems at immigration. And overstaying? That's no longer a slap on the wrist. Under newer regulations that took effect in 2026, overstaying by 16 days or more can now lead to actual deportation, plus a possible multi-year ban on returning to the country. The e-visa also cannot simply be extended once you're inside the country the way some older visa types can. Once those 90 days are up, you typically have to exit and reapply for a brand new one. None of this is meant to scare you out of going. It's meant to save you from becoming the guy standing at the airport counter, confused because he trusted a 5-year-old blog post instead of checking the current rules before he booked his flight. Number 7. Cheap doesn't mean cheap everywhere. Everyone arrives expecting Vietnam to be dirt cheap, and in a lot of ways it is. A comfortable single life across most major cities runs somewhere between $700 and $1,500 a month, all in. A modern one-bedroom apartment can go for as little as $250, and street food is routinely $1.50 a meal. Compared to most American cities, that's not a discount. That's a different universe. But here's the twist that catches long-term expats off guard. Certain things flip the script completely. Private health insurance, imported goods, Western grocery brands, some electronics. Those can cost the same as back home or genuinely more. So the real lesson isn't Vietnam is cheap. It's local life is remarkably cheap and imported life is not. The people who budget wisely are the ones who lean into the local version of everything and treat the Western comforts as the occasional treat, not the daily default. Number 8. Working remotely. Here is still a legal gray area. This one surprises the growing wave of remote workers heading to Vietnam. Countries like Portugal and Indonesia now have dedicated digital nomad visas. Vietnam, as of 2026, does not. There is no formal multi-year visa category built specifically for someone who works for a foreign company while living in Vietnam, which means most remote workers are technically operating on tourist e-visas in a space that isn't clearly defined either way. In practice, thousands of people do exactly this every year without an issue. But it's worth knowing you're in a gray zone, not a clearly marked legal lane, before you build your entire life plan around it. Number 9. Healthcare is better and cheaper than they braced for. Most Americans arrive expecting the worst-case version of a developing country hospital. What they actually find, especially in the private clinics of the major cities, is clean, modern, and startlingly affordable. A general doctor's visit can run somewhere around $30 to $60 without insurance. Compare that to what a single visit costs in the United States without coverage. It's not even close. And this isn't a secret only foreigners know. Vietnam has been quietly building a medical tourism industry, with people flying in specifically for certain treatments because of the combined quality and price. For anyone who spent years anxious about a single American emergency room bill, this is one of the more emotional discoveries of the entire trip. Number 10. The fruit cart has a QR code. Picture this. You walk up to a tiny wooden fruit cart on a side street, run by a woman who looks to be in her 70s. You assume it's cash only, obviously. Instead, she flips over a laminated piece of paper taped to the cart. It's a QR code. Vietnam, like a lot of Southeast Asia, essentially skipped several steps of Western banking history and jumped straight into mobile, cashless payments. Bank transfer apps and QR codes are now completely normal, even at the smallest, most informal stalls. So the country that a lot of Americans picture as cash-only backwater is, in some very specific ways, ahead of plenty of small businesses back home. Number 11. Coffee isn't coffee here. Quick, fun one before the ending. An American orders just a coffee. What shows up is thick, dark, and intensely strong, often mixed with sweetened condensed milk because fresh milk wasn't historically easy to store here. Some cafes take it even further with something called egg coffee, a whipped egg yolk and condensed milk foam sitting on top of dark coffee. It sounds strange on paper. Most people who actually try it end up ordering a second one before they leave. Number 12. The biggest shock isn't any of the above. Here's something you'll hear over and over if you talk to enough long-term expats. Someone books 2 weeks. 2 years later, they still haven't left. Ask them why, and it's rarely one big dramatic reason. It's the sidewalk coffee shop that knows their order. It's the motorbike chaos that eventually starts to feel like music instead of noise. It's realizing the foreign feeling wore off faster than they expected, replaced by something that felt uncomfortably close to home. That's the real twist by the end of most people's first trip here. They came braced for a war memory, a communist mystery, or a cheap escape. What actually shocks them is how quickly all of that stops mattering, and how quickly the place just starts to feel lived in. Vietnam in 2026 isn't the country most Americans grew up picturing. It's not the war. It's not a poor, cash-only backwater. It's not a lockdown surveillance state either. It's something in between. Something faster changing, warmer, and more contradictory than any single label can hold. Dun. So here's a question for you. If you had to actually pick one city to live in, Hanoi, Da Nang, or Ho Chi Minh City, which one would you choose, and why? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.